Mentally touching the ground with our awareness, noticing those sensations, and initiating the process of releasing physical tension there. Noticing the sensations and releasing tension in our feet and toes. Across the legs, all the way up to our hips. In the abdominal area, along with the lower back. In the chest, the shoulders, and then across our arms and hands, all the way down to the tips of our fingers. Releasing tension and all types of deliberate movements so deeply that even our fingers become completely still. So that our breath moves naturally without any attempts to hold it or to force it. And so that our face also becomes completely smooth in that we're releasing all the tension from our facial muscles. And by extension, allowing our entire body to rest in this dynamic equilibrium where the qualities of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance are present in synergy. They're supporting each other. And to deepen this union of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance, we can attend to the sensations associated with the process of breathing, the sensations that are arising throughout our tactile field when we inhale and when we exhale. Then, still resting in this manner, we can use our mind's ability to generate images, thoughts, specific mental states, and so forth, in order to undertake a very important practice called Guru Yoga, or the yoga of uniting our mind with the primordial Guru principle, the enlightened mind itself, as it expresses itself through all the great lineage masters, our root teachers in this life, and also the transhistorical figures symbolizing enlightenment. And to do this, we use our imagination, or the luminous aspect of our mind, as it's called in Buddhism. Seeing that above the crown of our head, there is a beautiful lotus flower floating in space, right above our crown. And on this lotus flower, which is fresh and fragrant, there is a flat moon disk upon which we can imagine either our root Buddhist teacher in this life, if we have such an important figure that we're deeply connected to, or, for simplicity, the Buddha himself in a shining golden form, resting in meditation, in monastic robes, radiating golden light, and expressing the qualities of awakening, the wisdom, the love, and the power of a fully awakened mind. Along with all the other qualities, peace, generosity, perfect concentration, and so on. And in simply seeing this figure above our crown and discerning these beautiful qualities in that image, we are already building a bridge to our deeper nature. But to make this union deeper, we can think of the figure above our crown as a window into our own basic goodness and into the enlightening influence of all the Buddhas, all the great realized beings. And we then supplicate this window along with all the great teachers of the past and the present. In our own words, simply asking, inspire my mind to transform. Help me master these arts of attitude bending, mind training. Make my mind receptive, flexible, open, discerning, so that I can understand and apply all the key points of these practices. And having truly made that request, truly yearning for that, we can then imagine and feel that the inspiring energy of the Guru principle starts flowing through our central energetic channel into our body, and by extension into our speech and into our mind, as a stream of light, or as a stream of light and nectar together, saturating our every cell and every aspect of our mind and speech with the qualities of wisdom, compassion, and power. And then to make even that deeper, we can imagine that the figure above our crown melts into a cloud of light, and that light absorbs into us. And then we release all the conventional images, all the reference points to simply rest in open, spacious clarity. And because this is a preliminary meditation, out of that clarity, we allow for our positive motivation for this class to arise. Shaping this motivation to make it profound, because it's aimed towards greater types of well-being, not simply sensory stimulation. Making it expansive, because we are hoping to realize the well-being for all sentient beings, not just for ourselves. And as we continue exhaling, we can, with each natural exhalation, strengthen this wish. May I truly realize these teachings to become a fully awakened being for the benefit of all. May it be so. Then we bring our awareness back to the body, noticing its sensations and experiences. We gently reactivate the body by rocking back and forth, moving our fingers, our toes. Activate our facial muscles by smiling if we wish to. And then we slowly conclude the preliminary meditation. So, this type of practice is already a type of attitude bending, we could say a mental bending that is done traditionally when we begin any meaningful activity within the Buddhist tradition, but especially when we begin the activities of studying, contemplating, or meditating, which allow us to generate the three types of wisdom. Wisdom that comes out of listening and studying, the wisdom that comes through contemplating something, thinking about something, debating something, discussing something, applying some ideas to our life. Is it applicable? Is it not? What's the deal? And then the third type of wisdom, of course, comes through meditation, through deeply meditating on the understanding that we have developed in order to allow that understanding to penetrate our mind and then transform from simply a bunch of conceptual ideas into direct experience, which of course also is divided into different stages. First, we would develop something that is called feeling, a feeling for something. And then eventually, if we keep practicing with that, we can arrive at what is known as realization, tokpa in Tibetan. And realization is the direct experience of a specific theme that truly has very profound transformative power. And then beyond that, there is the stage of irreversible realization, when something that has penetrated our minds so deeply, we have seen some aspect of reality so clearly that there is no going back. We're never going to go back from that. We're never going to return into the original state of ignorance that we were experiencing, at least not for the rest of that specific life. And if we attain irreversible realizations with regards to some of the key aspects of the path, those will remain with our mental continuum, with our mind stream throughout the rest of our rebirths. But we will never gonna be sliding back in terms of our spiritual development or psychological evolution. We'll only be going forward from that moment onwards. So that's kind of one thing to consider, actually. How do I want to use this precious lifetime that I have right now when I have obtained this specific container or this specific form that consists of interbraided threads of physical and mental energy. My physical and mental energy has now, under specific causes and conditions, assumed this form of an extremely capable human being. Not maybe extremely capable in maths, in my case, no, or cooking, completely hopeless, or sunbathing would definitely kill me because I have there's no pigment on, around my eyes, for example, so I'm not suitable for sunbathing. So I'm not extremely capable in those regards, but I do have, according to the Buddhist point of view, not because I'm saying so, but simply in terms of Buddhist analysis, I do have a unique combination, and so do we all present here, a unique combination of different factors, different causes, different conditions that allows me to potentially attain that irreversible realization in this life. Were I to apply the effort, were I to be intelligent enough, which is sadly not the case. But it's not all hopeless, because there are other things that I can hope to attain before I die, such as making sure that after passing away from this life, where I do have this incredible opportunity, I would at least either get a similarly good rebirth, which is, of course, one of the first goals of a Buddhist, to make sure your next rebirth is really going to be as good as this one, or I can even graduate sort of and go into a Pure Land, which is a special dimension of existence where beings can be reborn and then they continue progressing towards full awakening there in a very fast and efficient manner. And there are no distractions there, or not that many distractions at least. The conditions are perfect. You get best quality instructions. And when you're there, you will think back to this night, because you will have developed a certain level of clairvoyance with regards to your past lives by then. You'll look back onto this life and laugh bitterly about the quality of instructions you're receiving tonight. But if you got there, it's not all in vain, then some positive seeds have been planted, and you will be receiving instructions from actual Buddhas and truly realized beings there. So all good. So at least that, but even a more loftier aspiration, which is definitely doable if I apply myself to it, would be to attain that irreversible realization. So from the point of view of having access to those, I do have what's known as a precious human rebirth. Not simply any old human rebirth, but specifically precious human rebirth. But I will die, potentially tonight, potentially 30 years from now, who knows? Certainly not me, because the time of death is not clearly known to me, but because I definitely know that I will die one day, and because I know that at the moment of death, nothing will help but the Dharma, these methods for realizing profound types of well-being. I need to apply myself to the Dharma, which does not mean excluding myself from any social activity, for example, but it does mean doing my best to bring the qualities of wisdom and compassion into everything that I do. That's kind of the essence of this text. Then I think about the fact that everything in my experience, including my inevitable death, including the compulsions that arise in my mind and force me to do this or that, including my future rebirth and all of this, it all arises not randomly, not under the will of some superior being that decides my destiny, but, and certainly not under the influence of my mom and dad or the government or Karl Marx or anyone else. The causes for all these experiences lie within myself, and they are in Buddhism called karma. Compulsions left on the stream of my mind and the continuum of my mind through my own intentions. Those intentions imprint themselves on the mind, and then like seeds, they ripen into specific experiences. What is it that made me get up and come here and sit with all of you? Well, in my case, it was Kat's invitation and my incredible attachment to reputation. So strong that when I was being late last time, I was all worried and sweaty and uncomfortable. What will people think of me? So that's not particularly good, but we're using it kind of for a good cause. We're trying to harness that attachment and use it for everyone's benefit. But for you, what brought you here were definitely more positive imprints, because you came here hopefully to see whether there might be anything of value in this thing called Buddhist Dharma. And unlike me, you're not bound to be here because otherwise you will ruin your reputation. You came here of your own volition, on purpose. So that means that somewhere in the past you planted a positive seed, and that's great. That's something to celebrate. But there are also plenty of negative or destructive seeds in our mind, and they will also one day ripen unless we remove them. And that will push us into uncomfortable or problematic situations where our abilities, our opportunities will be much more limited. So we contemplate that deeply. And then we also contemplate the fact that the very nature of our existence under the influence of ignorance, or the very nature of samsara as it's called, and samsara is defined as being in a body, living with the body, with the speech, and with the mind that are under the influence of ignorance and derivative afflictions. This existence will inevitably keep producing uncomfortable experiences, or dukkha. I think we talked about sukha and dukkha in one of the first two meetings, where sukha is defined in Sanskrit. Sukha means happiness or well-being or bliss or joy. Primarily happiness is the main translation. Sukha is defined as a smooth going of events, of experiences, everything. The will turns nicely, and therefore, oh, what a joyful experience here. I had a nice glass of wine here. Now I have had good night's sleep, and then I'm waking up, walking in the garden. That's kind of a very basic level of sukha, but it's still meaningful in that, wow, how wonderful it is to have meaningful, hedonic, comfortable experiences. But we know it's not always going to be like that, because we wake up with a headache, and then we fight with someone, and then some people criticize us, and then the weather is not good, and we keep complaining about that, and that's kind of the rest of our life in the UK, we complain about the weather, and there's always something going wrong throughout samsara. So that's kind of something we contemplate very deeply. And contemplating these 4 points, precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, karmic causes and conditions, how karma conditions our mind, and then the shortcomings of samsara, or the drawbacks of samsaric existence. These are what are called 4 mind revolutions, 4 mental revolutions, Lodok Namshi, 4 ways to turn the mind around. And they are all encoded in the first of the instructions here in the text, train first in the preliminaries. So what would happen as a result of such training? 2 things. First of all, we will be completely changed as a human being, simply in terms of our quality of being in this world. The ethical quality of our being will change in profound ways, because imagine if everyone on this planet truly believed that this body that they have right now offers them incredible opportunities to cultivate wisdom and compassion. And it would be so stupid to not use these opportunities wisely. And also the timestamp on this precious human rebirth that we have right now is there. We know that we will not have this body for a long time, so we really need to be cultivating wisdom, compassion, ethics, concentration, all that right now. We need to be doing that mental training right now. And everything that we do will ethically produce results for ourselves. And even in terms of environmentalism, it is quite possible that our own mind will come back in the next generation to this very planet. So if we're destroying it, it's not particularly wise, even for ourselves, let alone for future generations, which is a thing that many people don't really care about. And then until we eliminate the afflicting factors from our mind, until we uproot such things as neurotic anger, neurotic attachment, and pride, and jealousy, and especially fundamental ignorance with regards to interdependence, we would continue suffering. So we better start working on it. We need to work on those mental afflictions. So imagine if all the 8 billion of people on this planet lived with that. That was the foundational learning that they received. Or if they were all born with this inner programming of, oh, that's exactly what I need to be doing. And yes, along the way, we do need to create food and eat it. We do need to produce coffee and drink it and so forth. We can go dancing a little bit here and enjoy a nice walk in the park and so forth, because all of those things can be transformed into further training in wisdom and compassion. It is totally possible to be drinking wine and strengthening wisdom and compassion, totally possible to be sitting in the garden and strengthening wisdom and compassion. But the underlying super goal master goal, ultimate goal would be like this. So if that was the case, wow, it would be a completely different world. But each being that changes in this manner is already, by the standards of this world, technically a saint, what is described as a saint, because we define people who are saints in different traditions as those who have deeply committed themselves to the practice of ethics, plus had some spiritual quest or some spiritual question that they were exploring. For those in the theistic traditions, that was the question of how do I align myself with the will of God? How do I understand the mind of God? How do I serve God better? Yada, yada, yada. For those in non-theistic traditions, such as Buddhism, it was all about aligning ourselves with the true nature of reality, understanding it, seeing it, and then allowing love and compassion to stream forth from that. But these are saints. So someone who has performed the 4 mental revolutions kind of reaches a state of being that is much more aligned with that. And that's very rare, but totally doable. We just need to do those 4 types of analytical meditations again and again and again and again until they penetrate the depths of our being. And those would be the 4 mental revolutions. And that prepares us for the next point. And that point is point 2, the actual training in bodhicitta. So coming back to this approach of low context, we need to define all the terms, right? So I guess we do know words point to the actual training in. Okay, so these are more or less clear, but bodhicitta must be or might be a bit more confusing here. And this is actually an incredibly important term in the Mahayana tradition to which this instruction belongs. So just to clarify that again, sometimes there is this kind of incorrect division of Buddhist schools where even at Buddhist conferences on occasion, where it is kind of shocking to be observing that, you would have some people seated in a section for the Vipassana school, then some people sitting in the Mahayana school, then some others sitting in the Zen school, then some others sitting in the Vajrayana school. And it just adds confusion to the entire thing, because Zen and Vajrayana and many other things or traditions or approaches are all parts of Mahayana. And then Vipassana is not a school at all. It's a specific, gigantic system of insight meditation techniques that are used by more or less all the Buddhist traditions. So it's just a name for insight practice, literally insight practice. In Pali is called Vipassana. In Sanskrit is called Vipashyana. Same thing, same word with slightly different phonetics. And that's not a school. It's just a system of practices that can be done in a million different ways. It's just now in the West, we have so-called Vipassana retreats, which can be indeed retreats where you are taught those insight practices to a certain degree. And it's not even 1% of what the entirety of them represent, but it's a few techniques that can indeed very deeply transform your experience. But sometimes you come to those retreats and actually you get no Vipassana instructions at all, because that's just the power of marketing. Some people have started using the name of Vipassana for retreats that actually have no connection to Vipassana. So it's all very confusing. So when we talk specifically about the Indo-Tibetan tradition of Buddhism, one important thing to say is that it is a tradition that has inherited or preserved, as it describes this herself, I guess, it itself describes this, has preserved 3 layers of teaching, 3 layers or 3 systems of practice that are all interconnected, but can be conceptually divided for practical purposes. The first level or the first layer is sometimes referred to as the foundational vehicle or the smaller vehicle. There are other ways of translating it. His Holiness Dalai Lama prefers the term foundational vehicle because it's kind of more neutral, and because it points out the fact that this is the foundation, we need it, there's no way of going around it if we don't have it. But the Sanskrit and the Pali terms are Hinayana sometimes, smaller vehicle literally, but it can also be called Shravakayana, the vehicle of the listeners, of those who listen to the teachings of the Buddha in order to become personally liberated. So then you have Mahayana on top of that, and Mahayana is divided into 2 categories. You have the general Mahayana or Paramitayana, the vehicle of perfections, and then you have kind of the special Mahayana or the Vajra vehicle, Vajrayana, which is also known as Tantrayana, the vehicle of Tantra, and Mantrayana, or Guhya Mantrayana, the vehicle of secret mantra. So Guhya Mantrayana, Vajrayana, Tantrayana, that thing, and the general Mahayana or Paramitayana, the vehicle of perfections, they're both within Mahayana. And it's specifically within this Mahayana thing that you meet this term bodhicitta all the time, because it is the essence of all Mahayana practices. Whether we're talking about Vajrayana or general Mahayana, there would always be a necessity for this thing, bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the key concept in Mahayana, and the key concept that describes the difference between Mahayana, with all of its branches and levels and so forth, and the foundational vehicle. So bodhicitta literally translates into mind of awakening, or awakened attitude, or mind that is awakening, awakening mind, the spirit of awakening. There's different ways of translating it, but bodhi literally means awakening, chitta literally means mind. So awakening, mind, one simple way of translating it. And this bodhicitta is divided into two primary aspects. One is called, in our translation of the root text, deepest bodhicitta. You would also find ultimate bodhicitta. So deepest, ultimate, kind of clear. They're all on the same page. And the other aspect is usually translated as relative or conventional bodhicitta. Relative used to be the more widespread translation. Now it's conventional. Sometimes you have other versions as well, all concealing and so forth, but conventional kind of works nicely. And these two aspects of bodhicitta, most of us initially need to train in separately, because one of them is about wisdom, one of them is about love, compassion, and all of that. The method side, as we call it, love, compassion, joy, empathetic, joy, equanimity, that's kind of the compassion side of things. So ultimate bodhicitta is the bodhicitta that describes our wisdom quality when it has fully flourished, and when our mind in terms of wisdom has become awakened or is becoming awakened. So it is the awakening mind. Like a flower that opens its petals, our mind, while awakening, wakes up to greater and greater degrees of wisdom. So from that point of view, it's the awakening mind. So ultimate bodhicitta is the mind that's waking up to its wisdom potential. Conventional bodhicitta is the mind that is opening up to its compassion potential. And conventional bodhicitta is often defined, that's the main definition. There's really no definition that contradicts this. Conventional bodhicitta is defined as the wish or the intent to become a fully awakened Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. The wish to become a fully awakened Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. Because bodhicitta is often used, the word itself is used to speak about conventional bodhicitta, you would sometimes just see that definition. Bodhicitta is the wish to become a fully awakened Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. But that only describes the conventional side. The ultimate side still needs to be described as well. And the ultimate side is the wisdom, kind of the rough definition for the ultimate side, is the wisdom that cognizes the true nature of reality. The wisdom in the mind of a bodhisattva that cognizes the true nature of reality. That's a more accurate description of ultimate bodhicitta. Or in the mind of a bodhisattva and a Buddha. Then the next question is, so what are these kind of people? Who are Buddhas and who are bodhisattvas? It's also important to define. So in Tibetan, we have the word Sangye, which is the name of this place. The word Sangye literally translates as Buddha. It is the Tibetan translation of the term Buddha. And when the great translators of early Tibet, or early in the Tibetan Buddhist history, when they were choosing the terminology to translate Sanskrit Buddhist terms, they created artificially a whole new language that would convey these unique terms in incredibly beautiful ways, where each syllable would describe the quintessential qualities of the thing that we're talking about. Sometimes even better than these terms do in Sanskrit and Pali, even though Sanskrit and Pali are the original languages that Buddhist tradition was using. Why? Because Sanskrit and Pali existed before the times of the Buddha, even though they both evolved under the influence of his teachings in powerful ways. But Tibetan was classical Buddhist Tibetan was created artificially to be the best language for explaining these terms. So Sangye is usually described or explained in the following way. We have the syllable sang and we have the syllable ye. So the syllable sang has the meaning of removing, clearing away, purifying. Something gets removed. And ge has the meaning of growth, expansion, cultivation, allowing something to expand, to flourish. So what is a Buddha? A Buddha is a being that has fully purified, sung all the problematic mental states, fully, to the very depths, fully removed all the unrealistic mental states. And that has fully and irreversibly uncovered or cultivated the beautiful qualities that there are. So the Buddha has fully removed, fully uprooted such things as ignorance and hatred and neurotic desire and pride and jealousy and many numerous others. Sometimes it's said that there are 84,000 problematic mental states that need to be removed, but they all kind of boil down to the same root problems. So all of those have been removed. All the positive ones, love, compassion, generosity, perfect concentration, empathy, and so forth, all of those have been perfected to such a level that there's no further level that you can go to. So the ultimate level of psychological evolution is what the Buddha is described as in the Buddhist tradition. You fully removed all the bad stuff, you fully developed all the good stuff. There's nowhere else to go beyond that. So, okay, that's the ultimate level of evolution that is available to any given consciousness, regardless of the form that this consciousness currently has. Right now, our consciousness is the consciousness of a human being. It's affiliated with human brain. It is manipulating this human body, yada, yada, yada. But at its core, there is some incredible potential that can be uncovered so that we become a Buddha. So that's the Buddha. Our historical Buddha is just one of the infinite Buddhas. He is important to us. That's why we were visualizing him in our first meditation, because he opened the doors of the Dharma and he kind of gave the instructions. All of these instructions that we're studying are derivatives, are instructions that are derived from the original instructions of the Buddha. They were just packaged in a convenient way by some of the great masters of the past, because if we were to read the original teachings of the Buddha, we would be reading hundreds of volumes of very, very different texts that talk about very, very different topics and do not always present us with a coherent model for actualizing the state of the Buddha. Once we have cracked this practical code that we're studying here, we will understand how it all fits into the same structure of awakening, of walking towards awakening. But until that happens, if we were to just take random Buddhist sutras and try to understand them, we'd get very confused. So to avoid that, we usually start with a practice text like this, and then we make our way back to the great treatises written by Indian masters, and then we make our way back all the way back to the original sutras, and then it becomes all very clear. It's clear how to understand it. But starting at the very beginning, the earliest material is not always actually wise, even though we think that's how it should be. If you want to understand the Bible, read the Bible itself. That's the Protestant approach. Ignore the so-called later scriptural material. Just read the Bible itself. Yes, kind of, there is some sense to it, but that approach, which arose in the West, ignores the fact that the Bible did not fall from the sky as it is. It was edited and specific texts were selected and written over many, many centuries and so forth. The same is true of Buddhism. And while we're still trying to figure out where was this text written, who is it for, what's the intended audience, who was the author, what did the author mean, while we're figuring all of that, we need to already be practicing something. That's why such texts as this one exist. They offer us practice instructions for right here and now. So that's the Buddha. Bodhisattvas, by contrast, are those who are on their way to becoming a fully awakened Buddha. So you sometimes have the word bodhisattva used even in English now, colloquially, as in the same way that we use such words as karma, mantra, samsara, and so forth. And I only have one joke, and that joke is that nirvana is a bend, karma is a soap from Lush, and samsara, I think, is perfume. So that's my only joke. Okay, we're done for tonight. But beyond that, there's also sometimes people using the term bodhisattva as well without kind of the clear understanding of what it means. But it kind of is used roughly in the West as a synonym to a saint. But it's more technical than that, because Buddhism has many different kinds of saints, we could say, many different types of realized beings. But bodhisattvas are specifically those who have generated bodhicitta. And to become an actual bodhisattva, you need to generate bodhicitta, the conventional one, the one that's about becoming a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. You need to generate that bodhicitta, that type of bodhicitta, in a way where it would never, ever again leave your mind. So you need to accomplish full integration of your mind with that wish. Once that has happened, you have become an actual bodhisattva. Before that, you might start aspiring for the same thing. You might start cultivating the same attitude, and turning our mind into that is the main part of attitude bending, actually, that we're trying to learn here. And you might also assume receive the so-called bodhisattva precepts or bodhisattva vows from a qualified teacher, or even yourself. They can be taken on our own, but you kind of formally commit yourself to this path of becoming a fully awakened Buddha. And when you do that, you also become kind of a bodhisattva, but you become a so-called aspiring bodhisattva. So someone who aspires to be an actual bodhisattva one day. When I grow up, I want to be an actual bodhisattva, and then one day a Buddha. But for now, I'm just aspiring for that. So this is why you would never ever hear any Buddhist master say, "Oh, I'm a bodhisattva," about themselves. Masters can say that about each other, and we can say it about great masters. We can, for example, think once again of Garchen Rinpoche, someone who's experienced incredible amounts of suffering, done incredible amount of practice, truly uncovered the beautiful qualities of the mind. Validly so, we can establish through observation and through what the other masters are saying and through his teachings and so forth. And we could say, oh, he's a true bodhisattva. We kind of make that conclusion based on the evidence available to us. But Garchen Rinpoche, from his side, would never say, I'm a bodhisattva, you know. And if he did, we would have valid reasons to be like, something's fishy. Because it's very rare, as I've mentioned before, that in the Buddhist tradition, someone would claim to have or admit to having actual realizations. Very rarely that is done to encourage practitioners, but it is usually done in very concealed ways where it wouldn't be obvious. Normally, most of these great masters, great practitioners, great yogis say, oh, I'm nothing, you know. I think I quoted Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche last time, was one of the most realized yogis of the 20th century, who used to call himself dog shit wrapped in brocade, and would say that his only quality is that he can recite Om Mani Padme Hum a little bit, okay? But then he became one of the leading masters of the 20th century, and when he was teaching, and when he was specifically giving teachings that we're gonna kind of briefly cover tonight, he would introduce hundreds of students to the ultimate nature of reality so that they would get an actual glimpse of that while that was happening. So incredibly efficient teacher, obviously not dog shit, but he would refer to himself that way, even though people in the West sometimes think that means he's having inferiority complex or something like that. No, you can admit to being dog shit without having inferiority complex. It's just everything is relative. So when an accomplished practitioner thinks, well, what are my accomplishments compared to the accomplishments of a Buddha? Nothing. I don't even have 1% of what a fully enlightened Buddha has. So from that point of view, we are nothing. We can validly say so. But compared to a complete beginner on the path, well, yeah, a specific practitioner would have more accomplishments than that. So it's all very skillful in that it allows us to not get too puffed up about being bodhisattvas. We're aspiring bodhisattvas at best, then we can become actual bodhisattvas. And when we add to the mix the ultimate bodhicitta, when we become not simply conceptually familiar with the true nature of reality, but when we experience that nature of reality, once again, not merely as a glimpse, which we might get at any point through practicing, or even through coming into contact with something that would trigger a glimpse. That's possible, but not simply a glimpse. Replicable, direct experience of the true nature of reality. Very different from just a glimpse. The glimpse is, oh, it came, and then you think about it for 20 years. And it's long gone from your mind. You have no way of going back to it, but you're still saying, oh, well, 20 years ago, I had a glimpse. So let me teach you about my glimpse. That's from a Buddhist point of view, again, this mama, what is that? You know, that's just the glimpse you had. You're reliving those good old days. Actual bodhisattva who has developed that can go back to that equipoise on the ultimate nature of reality anytime they practice, and they can rest with it. So once they gain that level of direct cognition of the nature of reality, they become noble bodhisattvas, or Arya bodhisattvas. And then those Arya bodhisattvas cultivate their minds in 10 subsequent stages, one after another, and stage 11 is becoming a fully awakened Buddha. So that's just to clarify the terminology. Bodhicitta, Buddha, Bodhisattva. 3 very important terms that you would come across throughout the Buddhist tradition. And if you visit different branches of Mahayana, I don't know, centers or countries associated with the Mahayana tradition. If you go to Taiwan, if you go to Japan, if you go into South Korea, if you go to Bhutan, Mongolia, Tibet itself, you know, northern regions of India, you would come across bodhisattvas everywhere. You would see statues of bodhisattvas and so on. You would see Buddhas, many different Buddhas in these countries, and you would hear about bodhicitta. Even though some people think, oh no, bodhicitta is just in Tibetan Buddhism. That's not true at all. Bodhicitta is present throughout Mahayana sutras, Mahayana treatises. So even though sometimes in modern Zen, in the West, it is not as strongly emphasized, if you read the source material from great Japanese masters and so forth, let alone Chinese masters who are even closer to the great treatises of India, you would see information on bodhicitta all the time, because it's the key concept of Mahayana. Having or not having bodhicitta, aspiring, not aspiring for bodhicitta, is the main difference between being a follower of the Mahayana or not being a follower of the Mahayana. And no one says we need to be a follower of the Mahayana, but kind of the working hypothesis here is that if you want to become a Buddha, to reach that ultimate stage of awakening, you need to practice on the Mahayana path. Whereas if you only practice the path of the foundational vehicle or of the listener vehicle, the Shravakayana, you would only get your personal liberation, but that would not be the full realization of your potential. You would still eliminate personal suffering, but you would not open your mind infinitely. It would not become omniscient. And it's still an incredible achievement, but your psychological evolution is not yet complete. And eventually, maybe 30 infinite billions of years from now, I don't know, 30 infinite eons from now, or at some point, one of the Buddhas will gently tap your shoulder and say, hey, you still have some work to do. There's still progress that you have not accomplished. So that is a possibility. However, it is said that it is faster to enter the Bodhisattva path directly and then become a Buddha than it is to first attain personal liberation, wait, relax, chill, and then be encouraged once again by a Buddha to enter the Mahayana path and then go through the whole Mahayana path. It kind of like wasting twice as much time to arrive at the same goal. So this idea of Buddhahood being the inevitable result for all beings, even if they first enter the personal liberation path, is known as Ekayana, or the single vehicle, the one vehicle. And that's a very big theme in the very famous Lotus Sutra that many people might have heard the name of at least. Lotus Sutra kind of explains it, that even though in terms of this illusion, there might be different paths, they will all bring us to the same result. But for some of us, we first need to think, no, I'm going to exit samsara, close the door behind me, just rest there and chill. That's kind of what's interesting to me. And some would say, no, I want to be a bodhisattva. I want to be practicing beings right now, and I want to fully open my mind as fast as possible. Eventually, according to this view of Ekayana, we would end up in the same place. So to end up in that place, we need to do one very simple thing. There's only one thing to do on this path. That is sometimes said in this literature of attitude training, or Lojong. We need to realize the 2 types of bodhicitta. And once we realize the 2 types of bodhicitta, great, we're enlightened when we have realized them fully. So that's kind of all there is to say about this. Thank you for coming. However, if we have not immediately realized 2 bodhicittas just from hearing that, we are then offered instructions on how to accomplish that. Normally, in the more gradual approach that is offered by many traditions, we would first be encouraged to practice the relative or the conventional bodhicitta, because it is actually easier to train in compassion and love and empathetic joy and altruism. These are very technical practices, and some people who are familiar with my work a little bit know that that's my specialty. I love teaching loving kindness meditations and so forth, and there's a huge amount of different ways of doing that, and lots of health related benefits and benefits in terms of our mental well-being, and covers a lot of our emotional needs. One of the best ways to cultivate emotional intelligence, blah, 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 blah. So many different things that even on a secular level encourage us to do that. And on the Buddhist path as well, we can cultivate very profound types of loving kindness and compassion, then transform them into this conventional bodhicitta, the wish to become a Buddha, meditate on that, will really transform our entire existence, very powerful ways. And then after that, once we have developed that relative bodhicitta or conventional bodhicitta, we would ask ourselves, okay, I now have this wish that is constantly present within my mind. That's my ultimate goal, to become a Buddha. So how do I become a Buddha? Well, I just need to remove my confusion about the nature of reality. The thing that removes our confusion about the nature of reality is ultimate bodhicitta. Or we could say, we possess ultimate bodhicitta to the degree to which we have removed our confusion. And of course, in general, the basic Buddhist principle is, to the degree that we remove our confusion about the nature of reality, we cease to suffer and we start to experience happiness. So the main thing in Buddhism is, it is being out of sync with reality that makes us suffer. Being in sync with reality, even conventionally, even to a limited degree, is what brings happiness. So there's always this example about how even on a relative level, if we are having dinner together, if we are aligned with our interdependence, there is an empathetic flow of information between us. You ask me about my day. I ask you about your day. We talk about how we're both constipated. This natural flow of love, compassion, appreciation, warm-heartedness. We are aligned with interdependence to a certain degree. And for that reason, we're both feeling good. Oh, what a pleasant night I just had. We were really appreciating each other. But imagine the same situation if one of us is truly self-centered to the degree where there's zero interest in the other person. Well, the other person will quickly start feeling that something is wrong. Am I only here to listen to your complaints and to never be able to offer anything of my own, except for, yes, hating on your enemies and loving your friends and yada, yada, yada. So the narcissistic dynamic there would not be particularly happiness inducing for at least one of us. And the other person, the person who's doing that self-centered dance of only talking about themselves, would also be deeply unhappy at a certain level, because there would be no way to fill that black void within themselves of constantly needing validation and attention and so forth, but never being able to offer anything in return. So unhappiness all around. And that's conventionally. That's just a very basic type of interdependence. That is still very important, but on a much deeper level, infinitely more so. Same with environmentalism, thinking, oh, I can dump all the polluted material that my country has produced into that sea next to this other country. That should be fine. Yeah? Things will turn out well. Complete misunderstanding of how systems on our planet work, and that everything is interconnected. You cannot be destroying that part of ecosystem without affecting the entirety of the thing. So very simple ways of aligning or not aligning ourselves with interdependence already bring so much clarity. But of course, here we're working with much deeper ones. But this specific text in the edition that we're following, and that's the earlier edition and the more widespread edition, first invites us to cultivate the ultimate bodhicitta and then to train in conventional bodhicitta. But there is never the assumption that we would only start working on this ultimate bodhicitta and not move on to the conventional bodhicitta until we have fully realized the ultimate one. That simply is not how it works, because this text is teaching us all the different facets of practice so that we can start applying them either on a loop, we can say, or as different aspects of our practice throughout the day. So this is just to explain very clearly that there's never an assumption that we would now look at the instructions for ultimate bodhicitta and only stay with those. and not start practicing the conventional bodhicitta until we have mastered the ultimate one. It's simply an approach that for most of us would not work. We need both, because both would be allowing us to make our mental energy more and more flexible, more and more pliant. And it's through that flexibility that we establish through following both approaches at the same time that we will succeed in both approaches eventually. So we talk about this in this Buddhist tradition as the two wings of a bird, the wing of compassion and the wing of wisdom. Ultimate bodhicitta is the wing of wisdom. Conventional bodhicitta is the wing of compassion and also love and all the other types of kindness. And we need to be flapping them both in order to fly somewhere. If we only have one wing, well, we're not going to fly very far. So we are introduced to these two bodhicittas in this order, in this specific text, but we need to be working with them kind of as two parallel tracks. And there are also ways of uniting them within one meditation session that we're going to look at. So the first bodhicitta that's introduced here is the ultimate one, or the deepest one. And there is one aphorism here that is present in some editions of this text, but not in ours. And I will still explain that aphorism, even though it's not here in the text. It does not mean that the text is incorrect. It's just there are different editions of it. But the aphorism is fairly important, so I think it's good to mention it. So this aphorism then that would precede all the aphorisms related to training in Deepest Bodhicitta is usually translated as, once stability has been established, let the mystery be revealed. Or we could translate it in a number of ways, but basically, once you establish stability, let the mystery be revealed. So once stability, reveal mystery. Very simple. But what does this refer to? It is a foundational instruction that explains to us that until we establish two types of stability, we're not really going to succeed in revealing this mystery of the ultimate nature of reality. So what are these two types of stability that we need? What is the foundation that we need to build, to a certain degree at least? One type of stability is the stability with regards to our faith in the Dharma. And that's kind of the more awkward one to talk about in the West. And not particularly awkward if you're speaking to an audience of Tibetans or Himalayan practitioners in general, Mongolian practitioners and so forth, because they do have natural faith in the Dharma. They have been raised to appreciate the Dharma, to see the validity of the Dharma, to know how many transformative things have happened to them as a culture and to them as individuals due to the Dharma. So they already have that, so they can confidently move on to the second type of stability. But for us, whoa, faith, I don't like that. I'm an intelligent dude, and faith is for people who go to church on Sunday, blah, 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 blah. That's kind of the associations that we have. It's less of a problem in a yoga-related audience, for which I'm deeply grateful, because it's usually less of a problem for yoga people to talk about such things as karma, reincarnation, chakras, and all of that, kind of the faith-related stuff, basically. Whereas if I were speaking to an audience of lawyers, or I don't know, investment bankers, that would be a much stranger concept to introduce. But faith is a specific mental function. It's a specific mental state that relates to our ability to trust that something can do something. So, of course, theistic systems have faith towards God and all those sorts of things. So there's trust there that God will save you or guide you or controls everything that's going on or has created the universe or whatever it is that is ascribed to God within those systems. Buddhism is generally a trans-theistic system or a non-theistic system. What does that mean? We say that it's a trans-theistic system because in Buddhism there are worldly gods. Buddhism does talk about gods as a type of rebirth. So you can be temporarily reborn as a kind of Thor and Odin and their entire family, kind of a god on Mount Olympus. You can be reborn as one of those shiny beings, but you're not saving anyone. You're not controlling the universe. It's just blissing out there and having fun. And then eventually you will also, in the long run, die. So it's kind of like being an elf, in the Lord of the Rings. You're just vibing, but you're not the master of the universe. So, okay. So there's that. And because those gods are kind of, yeah, they're fun and they can be friendly or unfriendly, but they're kind of like fellow humans, also fellow animals and so forth. They're not the ultimate masters of anything that's going on. It's useless to be praying to them and saying specifically, please help me attain nirvana. They can help with the weather. That's one thing that they're good at. So if they're kind of feeling not particularly happy, the weather will be confusing or bad. So I guess the local gods of the UK have not been propitiated for a very long time, which makes sense, historically. So the weather is all confusing. But that's kind of one of the expressions of their activity. But beyond that, yeah, they're not going to give us nirvana. That's the main thing. Nirvana and full awakening will be brought about by our own effort. So transtheistic and non-theistic, because from a Buddhist point of view, and that can be described at much greater detail, there's no creator to this universe. It's just an endless stream of causality. The idea of the first cause from a Buddhist point of view is illogical, and there's certainly no ultimate being that we can pray to so that it will give us something like nirvana or even a good rebirth. There is ultimate reality. There are benevolent beings that can guide us. Those are the realized beings, such as the Buddhas and so forth. There is an ultimate dimension to our own being, which is nothing but luminous, spacious emptiness that is infinitely imbued with love and compassion. So there is all that. We could say, even in Buddhism, that there is ultimate boundless love. That's one of the facets of our true nature. There are infinite beings that are guiding us towards that true nature. But there's not one dude, and one lady for that matter, that we could pray to and just wait for them to magically pluck us out of this whole thing. So faith in Buddhism would look like something else then. What is it that we're trusting? Primarily, we're trusting that these instructions can be, all the instructions in the Dharma, can be validly tested. We do not need to believe that Buddhas exist, that type of evolution exists. We just need to accept it as a working hypothesis that can be validly tested. If the Buddha is right, his conclusions are replicable. His experiment is replicable. And anyone who has the time, the effort, the energy, and a precious human rebirth will be able to replicate that if they have a meditation cushion and the willingness to sit on it for a few decades. But because the experiment is multi-layered, we can prove the validity of Buddha's conclusions at each step of the path. We can prove that Buddha is valid when he's saying that the 4 mental revolutions will transform the quality of our existence. Either yes or no. So invest dozens of hours into those analytical meditations and see whether your entire way of existence, your subjective quality of life has been transformed. Simple, dozens of hours, right? Not 80 years. Just the more you practice, the more you would feel the result or not feel the result. And then if you do not feel the result, there's only 2 conclusions. Either the experiment was done incorrectly or it was done correctly, and you're proving that the Buddha is wrong, which if you prove that he's wrong, and if you validly prove that he's wrong all around, yeah, Buddhists would be happy because, wow, then we can just enjoy sex, drugs, and rock and roll or follow a completely different path that is then valid, whereas the Buddhist path is invalid. Okay, we can just toss it out. Who needs it? But so far, it has been proving itself for each individual practitioner that's really invested that effort. Therefore, you have yogis and yoginis who do invest thousands and tens of thousands of hours into yogic practice, especially these inner yogas of mind bending. And then they emerge from their cave and they're happy and radiant, and they're not saying, oh no, that was a waste of time. Where's the nearest pub? I mean, they might go to a pub, some of them, some do. It depends on what lifestyle they're following. But I've never heard a yogi of that nature emerge from a cave and say, oh no, there is no, awakening. There is no endless and beginningless mental stream. All of that was made up. I've proven that definitively. Now let's have fun, or suffer or whatever. That never happens. So there must be a reason for that. So that's one type of stability. Trust that these working hypotheses might be proven to be correct. And trust in the fact that these great beings that have invested all these thousands of hours into it are valid guides with regards to these systems. and valid assistance on the path. They can provide valid assistance to us as practitioners on the path. So that is trust towards the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the doctor, he's prescribing his medicine. The Dharma, the teachings in this regard, is the medicine. So we need to at least have some idea that, yeah, maybe these pills will help me. Let's see. And then the Sangha, or our skilled bodhisattvas and other types of beings who are assisting us on the path by providing instruction, creating conditions for us to practice, nudging us along the way, and so forth. So that's the first type of stability. The second type of stability, which is just yogic training at its best, is the attentional stability. So at least until we develop a certain degree of attentional stability, it will be very difficult to succeed in the cultivation of ultimate bodhicitta. So what is attentional stability? It's the result of training and concentration. So that's something that modern psychology is obviously very interested in. About 100 years ago, William James, who was the first major researcher of attention, came to the incorrect conclusion, even though he had multiple insights about attention in general, that attention cannot be trained, and it's a fixed entity that you're born with. So you're either naturally attentive, or you're all over the place, you're distracted. And fortunately, through research and also through opening our minds a tiny bit to the incredible traditions that Asian culture has preserved and created, honestly, we have discovered that no, attention can be trained. Even if we do have ADHD and so forth as a medical diagnosis, we can train in concentration through using techniques for that. And those techniques in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition are called Shine techniques or Shamatha techniques. Shamatha is a Sanskrit term. The Pali version of that is Samatha. So usually Samatha and Vipassana, Shamatha and Vipassana, come together as two branches, two major important aspects of Buddhist training. However, in the modern day and age, we hear a lot about Vipassana, but we completely miss the thing about Samatha, which is a precondition to proper Vipassana. So what are these techniques? These are very technical explanations on how to cultivate our attention. And to explain that fully would take some dozens of hours, and to realize that would take some years of intense retreat practice. But even without that, through doing some daily practice at a regular basis, we would be able to at least, with regards to the 9 stages of attentional training that are described as the most quintessential ones and accessible to us, with regards to those 9 stages of training our attention, even in terms of simply having some daily practice, would be able to move on to the 2nd or the 3rd stage, which is already an infinitely better level of attention than most people have. I remember one research that was done on how many seconds can a person hold an object in mind for? For how many seconds can you hold an object in mind? The average for a normal person was 2 seconds. The average for a Harvard student was 4 seconds. From a Buddhist point of view, that's nothing, mama, absolutely nothing, because the state that is the 10th stage in that attentional training, and that's not the ultimate stage. There are at least 8 more stages above that can be accomplished. And the Buddha realized them all very easily in his lifetime because he was a prodigy. He was an attentional prodigy. He had naturally such pliant attention that it was very easy for him to master the arts of concentration of his day. Except he then found out that simply training and concentration does not liberate you from suffering. It simply temporarily numbs the suffering. You go into a trance and you're chilling there, and then you emerge from the trance, and even though your mind is kind of rarefied and refined right now, you are still under the influence of that primordial ignorance. So then he added the Vipassana component to it, the insight. Whereas in his day and age, most people either focused on such things as asceticism and self-mortification and things like that, or ritual offerings, or on attentional training without the insight component. So that was his innovation, his contemplative science, added to the contemplative technology of concentration. But the 10th stage, after these 9 stages that we can go through, is the so-called realization of shamatha, which is kind of the most optimal thing to have on this path eventually. So another thing to aspire for, way before we become actual bodhisattvas, let alone before we become awakened. If we want one day to train in this, to at least realize the fullness of shamatha, and that would require some months or years in retreat for some of us, even in very good conditions, that would be incredible. Of course, at our level, if we even go to stage 2, that's already a huge development. Stage 2 means that we're able to roughly hold the object and not get fully distracted for about a minute. So 4 seconds for a Harvard student, a minute, ooh, you know, immense difference. But that full realization of shamatha is the ability to hold an object in mind with single-pointed concentration for 4 hours with no dullness and no agitation, no excitation arising in our mind over those 4 hours. So fully focused on that object for 4 hours, not a moment of laxity, let alone sleepiness and things like that. Not a moment of excitation where we get distracted and fly all over the place and think about lunch tomorrow and revenge plans and all those sorts of things that we think about. So incredible, right? But for Buddhists, that's not the ultimate attentional attainment. The practical thing that can be attained, there are much deeper levels after that. They're not strictly necessary for then succeeding in insight. They're not strictly necessary for deepest bodhicitta, but that shamatha level, wow, that would be incredible. But whatever degree we're able to muster now would be incredible for this training in deepest bodhicitta and also for training in conventional bodhicitta. Because once we start doing these ultimate bodhicitta meditations, if we start doing them with a mind that gets distracted after 2 seconds, I could be reading out these beautiful instructions for 100,000 years. You will forget them after 2 seconds. So after 2 seconds, I'll need to read them out again. And after 2 seconds, you will forget them again. So it will be kind of an endless process where it's just, I'm telling you, this is where the moon is, but you have a tick, so your head is like this. And I can be pointing it towards that moon, and ideally you would have a much more qualified guy pointing towards that moon, but that's kind of beside the point. I would be pointing at that moon, but you're like this. So all you can see is kind of a very, very rough shape that's shiny there, and that's exactly the level that will be available to us right now in training in ultimate bodhicitta. And yet, of course, even seeing that there is something shiny there, super inspiring. Because imagine we were raised to believe that there's no light in the universe, you know, or the only light that exists is electric light. So then one day someone takes us outside and points at that thing called the moon first, because we'd be too shocked to see the sun. Or maybe it will damage our vision. So we'll look at the moon for the first time, but once again, we cannot see it. We just see a shiny, blurry thing because our head will not stop spinning, which is what happens with bad attentional skills. And yet, wow, so powerful to even get that glimpse. That will inspire us to continue working with this. So that's exactly how we learn to practice these things at our initial level. Were we to invest all the time and effort that we can into this, all of these instructions will come alive for us so powerfully. We will become awakened. So that's kind of the goal. So that's the other type of stability that's needed. And there's no shortage of different concentration techniques that we can use for that. Mindfulness of breathing, bona fide concentration technique, the most common one that the Buddha taught in his earliest teaching. But he offered a few dozen different concentration techniques that can allow us to cultivate those levels of attention. Loving kindness is one of them. Focusing on loving kindness is a concentration technique, but it also makes us kind. So yay, double the benefit. Compassion, same thing. Empathetic or sympathetic joy, same thing. But also focusing on the mind itself, focusing on visualized objects, of which there is an infinite amount. The image of a Buddha, a syllable that we visualize, an orb of light somewhere within our subtle nervous system, and so forth. Many, many different practices like that. Symbols of the 5 or emblems of the 5 elements, simply colors, different philosophical points or types of perception. For example, it's possible to cultivate single point and concentration by meditating on the kind of contaminated nature of the body and how body is a sack of shit, basically. That's kind of what the meditation does, but that's done for dual purposes of reducing our neurotic attachment to the body while also cultivating concentration. It looks like hundreds of techniques, actually, of which there are some that are taught more or less commonly, like mindfulness of breathing, or loving kindness, or meditating on a visualized object, or meditating on the mind itself. These are the 4 most important ones for the Tibetan tradition. Especially the breath, the mind, and a visualized something. And there's different things that we can visualize. So, okay, we can master any one of these techniques, work with it, and then we will attain some level of attentional stability. We'll start working with this ultimate bodhicitta. And in the meantime, we'll keep practicing concentration. At one point, we might do a longer retreat to work on concentration in a more focused manner. Then we'll bring that concentration into both types of bodhicitta. We'll keep practicing with it. So that kind of stability in concentration is a necessary condition. That's why I thought it was very important to mention that missing line, kind of. It's not present in all the editions, as I've said, but if you don't have that stability, the best you will be able to accomplish is this turning head, which is still important. So then the actual instructions on this deepest bodhicitta. First one here is ponder that phenomena are like a dream. So this can be unpacked in a sequence of philosophy-related lectures, which would all introduce us to this idea in very elaborate ways. So you would have a philosophy professor, a Khenpo, in some traditions. In other traditions, those are called geshes. So you would have a learned Khenpo or a geshe, basically a PhD in Buddhist philosophy, except that's actually stronger than PhD in some ways. You would have them talk about why, philosophically speaking, we can validly say that reality is like a dream. Everything that we perceive is like a dream. It's good to do that. That's why on our resource page for this course, we have a link to one commentary that I recommend as the beginning one, and that's by Alan Wallace, because he brings in things from both the traditional material, but also explains it in reference to modern science and these dialogues between quantum physics and Buddhism and so forth. So that gives you kind of a more modern overview of the whole thing, even though it's firmly based on instructions from a very realized master, Kungpo Barshi. But then beyond that, eventually, you might study other commentaries as well, and you would see actually that they teach these lines about ultimate bodhicitta in very different ways. But practically speaking, we better meditate on it. So how do we meditate before we go into actual meditation? What's important is to understand that this instruction is related. So if you don't mind, we'll take 5 extra minutes or so after the end. I mean, if you need to rush out, that's fine, but we'll take that tiny bit of extra time to conclude the thought before we leave and to meditate on it a bit. So from a Buddhist point of view, our energy of awareness manifests in 4 domains of experience that we have. We have the waking state, which is where we are right now. We have the state of dreaming, called sometimes the double confusion, because we are as confused as we are in waking state, but we're confused on top of that because also it's a dream, so double confusion. Then we have the dreamless deep sleep, which is when we're not seeing anything other than just blackness. And we're not really aware that we're seeing it, but we are. But the level of our clarity, mental clarity, is so low that it's just kind of a very, very low signal of awareness still observable there. So when we wake up after that, we're kind of very vaguely aware that there was just some blackness there. And then finally, we have the so-called 4th state. These are associated, by the way, with the 4 chakras that we have. It is said that in our waking state, most of our prana, or an important a lot of our pranas are here in the head. They create the projection of waking reality. Where our pranas converge in a throat, we're experiencing dreaming. That's why in dream yoga instructions, you have a lot of throat practices. When we're in deep dreamless sleep, our pranas are primarily in the heart, in the center of the chest. For the 4th state, there is a connection with our navel center. So what is this 4th state? It includes a rapid and powerful and forceful contraction of our awareness energy that gets removed from the grosser level of the mind and even the subtle level of the mind into the subtlest level of the mind available to us. But unless we are a very experienced yogi, we cannot stay in that contracted state that's super close to our innermost subtle mind. So then there's an explosion of that. So the 4th state, for that reason, is primarily experienced by us, and it's the most subtle state that we have. It's experienced primarily when we are sneezing, yawning, having an orgasm, and dying. And between the 4, the most important one, of course, is the process of dying, because when we're dying, that state lasts a tiny bit longer than when you're having the explosion of an orgasm or you're yawning or you're sneezing. So it's very good to observe that, actually. This 4th state is the most powerful of the 4. It is, If we harness that, we will attain awakening much faster, much quicker. But it's even good to observe that just out of curiosity. When we're sneezing or yawning, there is a momentary contraction of energy. It's withdrawing. Notice, observe yourself when you're sneezing or yawning or falling asleep. We also experience it when falling asleep, I should have said. Or before an orgasm, there is a contraction and energy there, and then there's an explosion, quite literally. You sneeze all over everyone. And they're like, ew, or you yawn, that sound that goes out. And I'm not going to illustrate the other three, but the same with falling asleep. There's your awareness contracts into subtler and subtler degrees, and then it explodes into the dreaming state or the dreamless state. So kind of in between states, we do temporarily enter this fourth one. But here, we're primarily interested in the first two, the waking state and the dreaming state. So in the elaborate instructions of the so-called dream yoga in Buddhism, and it is kind of same as lucid dreaming, but more advanced, more elaborate, with much more detail and much more meaning to it. Because lucid dreaming is simply about becoming lucid in dreaming, and then most people use that for sex. There was someone did research on that, and when they asked people who train themselves in lucid dreaming, which is an ability that can be naturally available to some people, but others can train in it artificially. People just have different levels of giftedness with regards to it. And there's research on it that has definitively proven scientifically that lucid dreaming does exist. It's possible to induce a lucid dream, yada, yada, yada. Fascinating research that was done by Stephen LaBerge and his colleagues. So when people ask lucid dreamers, what do you use lucid dreaming for? Regular people who are not Dharma practitioners usually say, well, I kind of, that thing. Well, okay. Or to travel, or to go through walls, or, to have fascinating adventures, but not for spiritual practice, capital S, capital P. Whereas in Buddhism, the whole point of dream yoga is specifically to use that mental freedom that we gain within the dream for a spiritual practice. So you have two sets of instructions there: daytime dream yoga, nighttime dream yoga. Nighttime dream yoga is teaching us how to first induce lucidity within the dream, and then how to experiment with the dream in different ways so as to gain mastery of it, so that we can shape that dream reality. And if we wish, transform ourselves into, I don't know, a meditational deity, or travel to Pure Lands, or just see how pliant that reality is when we understand that we're dreaming. And the daytime dream yoga instructions is exactly what's meant here, in that the instruction is very simple. In this waking state, perceive it as a dream as well. But that needs additional explanation, because please don't take that to mean that you can jump out of windows and fly, or kill other beings in the same way that you can kill beings in your dream, yada, yada, yada. Obviously, different level of causality, different type of causality works in the waking state than in the dream. So in the dream, you can go through a wall. In this reality, some beings might be able to do that, but we're not there yet, so we shouldn't attempt flying out of the windows and so forth either. But what's the commonality? Within the dream, when you look around in the dream, let's say you're dreaming that you are, I don't know, you're in Austria, you're looking around at all these people in their lederhosen, drinking beer at Oktoberfest. That's your dream. And you look down on yourself, and you are this bearded, gigantic dude, also wearing lederhosen. And you kind of start suspecting that something's wrong there, because in your waking reality, you're a girl. And here you are as a giant bearded dude. So in that moment, what is the dream made of? What is it made of? What is your body made of? What are all these people made of? What are the walls made of? What is the entirety of Austria in that dream made of? There's a more elaborate and a more condensed answer. The condensed answer is that it's all made from your mind. It's made from the luminosity of your mind. The luminosity of your mind created these holographic appearances, including the appearance of you as a bearded guy, but not simply your body. Until you started doubting it, you had the feeling that you are a bearded dude. It only broke when you started doubting it. Then transfer back to this reality. The walls and the floor and all these boxes and these bits of paper and Zoom and everything, you know, the computer itself, all of that might be made from atoms. True. There is something called atoms and we can do research on them and so forth. But within our perception of it, we're not seeing atoms themselves. At no point in time do we see any physical object directly. What we see is a holographic reflection of those atoms and so forth that can be scientifically looked into. We only experience everything through our mind and the holographic appearances of the mind. So our perception of reality in waking state is also made from the luminous energy of the mind. In the Bön tradition, this stage in this meditation is described with two very simple words, Nangwa Sem. Appearances are mind. So everything that we perceive are so-called appearances, holographic perceptions, except those appearances are not limited to the visual ones because sound is also an appearance, Nangwa. Smells are appearances, these inner reflections that we work with. So this is where there could be a very elaborate then discussion about, well, do from a Buddhist point of view atoms exist? Many schools would say yes, they do, but it's irrelevant in this discussion. When we look into atoms and how do they exist and how we can combine them to create, I don't know, something good for humanity, hopefully, that's valid there. How do we play with these atoms? What do they do? But in terms of, do we perceive atoms without our mind at any point? Can we research atoms without our mind? Can we do anything without our mind? We are bound to this mind, and that we can only perceive reality through this mind. There's never a perception of reality without the mind for us. Even if we were to task a machine with looking into reality, and machine that is mindless were to come to some conclusions, we would then receive the report, and we would still read that report and understand that report with our mind. So we cannot go around that mind, no more than we can go and perceive the dream without the mental holograms. So what does that mean? We sit in meditation, and then we can also do it in between meditation sessions. But we sit in meditation formally, that's kind of important thing here. And once we have made our mind receptive by meditating on the breath a little bit, calming down, generating a positive motivation, and doing a bit of that guru yoga that we did in the beginning by inviting inspiring influence, we then simply remind ourselves that this is like a dream. Everything in my perception right now is like a dream. Everything outside, but also this persona. This persona, for me, the persona of Michael Lobsang Tenpa, blah, 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 is also made from the mind. Nangwa Sem, appearances of the mind, are the mind. The dream persona is an appearance as well. It's just I affiliate myself more closely to this one and less closely with the thermos, even though there is also some affiliation there because it's my thermos, you know. And I affiliate myself less with your socks and then less with those yoga mats. But actually, all made from the same material of the luminous energy of the mind. So I need to meditate on it so deeply that it will penetrate my mind. So let's just stop for 5 minutes, sitting together, not closing our eyes, but entering this meditative state in which we open our senses widely and we understand that all the appearances appearing to our mind are like a dream. Just like a dream, they're made from the mind, from the mind's creative energy. taking a step back, not just from outer appearances, but even from this dream persona that we see ourselves as. Made from the mind, exactly like any other dream. And resting in that, returning to that understanding again and again, and reminding ourselves of why that is so if needed, is the essence of training in this point. So for one more minute, resting in this perception of our waking reality as being like a dream. And allowing ourselves to feel a certain element of joy, as if we have become lucid in a regular dream. By knowing that this is like a dream, we are inducing lucidity in the waking state. And that with that element of joy, returning to the body and reactivating it. So that's kind of how we do it. And there are more elaborate ways of doing it in which we would go through some logical arguments for why it is like a dream. And there are more quintessential ways of doing it. And we have just applied a more quintessential one, just going straight for, okay, it is like a dream. It is made from holographic energy of the mind. The existence of atoms is a different issue because for us, atoms without the mind are what in physics is sometimes described as the black box. It's an inconceivable, unknowable something. In Buddhism, the definition of an existent phenomenon, something that exists, is something that can be cognized by the mind. So if there were theoretically something that the mind could not ever cognize, touch, apprehend, be aware of, it would be completely irrelevant. It would never penetrate this, it would never enter the sphere of our awareness, so why would we care? The only things that matter are things that we are aware of or can become aware of, things that can enter the domain of our experience. So these are the only things that matter. Everything else for us, impossible to establish its existence, and also who cares? You know, we do care, however, about things that are in the domain of our experience. And one major thing there is our entire waking reality, which includes this dream persona that we have, to which we're so tightly bound by our grasping attitude. So even resting in this already, to a certain degree, starts lessening our grasping at reality. And next time we will talk a little bit about how to define that more elaborately and describe what is the opposite of ultimate bodhicitta. What is its main enemy? What is the ultimate bodhicitta working against? But I would like to, before we conclude, also read out some instructions on the specific practice that are offered by Longchenpa, who's one of the greatest luminaries in the Great Perfection or Dzogchen tradition. So he suggests, in general, he has a whole text about, a beautiful text, very practical text, but it's a whole book about different ways of looking at reality as being illusory, comparing it to magical apparition created by a skilled magician and to a dream, and he uses other metaphors and he unpacks each one of them. So for the dream, he has a whole chapter on that specifically, and he says things like, regarding the main practice, you should meditate at all times, day and night, considering that all things in their variety, both outside and within, appear to you like magical illusions through their causes and conditions. They are in truth unreal and tangible and unobstructed openness. So one thing that this means is that, and this was with regards to the illusion analogy. And for the dream one, he offers many similar explanations. And the thing that's important here is that at no point Longchenpa or Geshe Chekawa or Atisha or any of the masters we're dealing with here, at no point do they say that these things arise randomly, because dreams also arise under the influence of causes and conditions. Specific imprints in your mind and specific types of physical activity and energetic activity give rise to dream appearances. At no point before having an actual dream do you have like a video game screen in which you are invited to choose the exact dream that you're going to be having. You can induce that if you're a master of lucid dreaming, but for most of us, the dream unfolds under the influence of specific causes and conditions. Causes lead to results. So similarly, in this reality, when this dream of waking reality unfolds, before we are born into this body and this mind, no one says, well, choose your player, and then we're like in a video game invited to choose the hair color and the family and the level of wealth we're going to enjoy. I mean, some New Age systems think it's like that. There are New Age philosophical positions that state, oh, before we came into this enlightenment, into this embodiment, you chose all the challenges for yourself and all the lessons that you're going to learn. But from a Buddhist point of view, that contradicts actually the logic of causes and conditions, because causes need to bring conditions. If you have created negative causes, you would experience that. Positive causes, you would experience positive results, yada, yada, yada. But in terms of being made from the mind, these appearances are not different. And so Longchenpa invites us to start with a Guru Yoga practice. He says, visualize above your head, upon the center of a lotus and on discs of sun and moon, amid a host of deities and dakinis, so different expressions of awakened energy in forms of different figures, your own root teacher, never separate from the teachers of the lineage. Make offerings and praise and pray that you may train successfully in seeing all things as a dream. Then yourself and all phenomenal existence dissolve in light that melts into your teacher. So last time we did it like that, and the other approach is dissolving the teacher into yourself. There's both systems that are taught. It's not particularly, it both have their specific effects on our mind. So like Longchenpa here suggests imagining that we melt into light and absorb into the teacher, which of course, once again, reminds us that this persona as well is merely a holographic projection. Rest then for a moment in a space-like state of meditation, so with no reference point. Blessings, realization thus will naturally occur. So this is the preliminary step. And then meditate according to the main part of the practice. Tell yourself repeatedly, grow used to it, that outwardly all mountains, valleys, regions, towns, the earth, fire, water, wind, and space, sentient beings, and the rest, the five sense objects, form, sound, texture, smell, and taste, and inwardly, the body, faculties of sense, and consciousness are nothing more than dreams. So that's exactly what we did, except we did Guru Yoga in the very beginning of the session, and then we meditated on how it's all an illusion at the end, and only for 5 minutes. But were we to set a timer and try our best to return to this understanding with whatever limited attentional stability that we have, bringing it back actually would train it anyway. After having accumulated some hours of this practice, or at least some minutes, we might see a subtle shift there, and how fixed this reality appears, and also on how reactive we are towards it. Because if you understand that this is more like a dream, you'd be less likely to get hyperactivated when the wrong type of coffee has been served, which is one good illustration of whether we have succeeded in this practice. Is you are ordered, I don't know, soya milk latte, and the poor barista, working their ass off for very limited amount of money, they did something wrong, and then you are flying off the handle because this is the worst thing ever. You know, it's like my day has been horrible. First, you know, there was something wrong with my Tesla, and then I ran out of pumpkin spice. And now I came here. I'm kind of like exaggerating, obviously, with no one particular in mind other than myself, but kind of the small dramas, you know. We can become very reactive towards those because it all feels real. Oh, the real absence of the right coffee that I ordered. Well, if we actually succeed in these types of practices, we would be less reactive in a negative way, but we would also not fall into nihilism, which is a deep, deep, profound mistake to make in these practices. But we will talk about that next time. So the correct way, yes, it's all like a dream, and yet everything matters. But everything matters in that we need to be kind. So homework, if you have not seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, and even if you did, you can go and watch it and think about correct and incorrect understanding of reality. The bagel, Everything Everywhere All at Once. The bagel represents the incorrect understanding of emptiness. What the mom does represents eventually, with the dad's help, represents the correct understanding of emptiness. That's kind of, from a Buddhist point of view, what the movie is about. But even if you don't watch the movie, like, forget that, scratch that. The important thing here is that we do want to make our perception more flexible, but we need to avoid falling into nihilism, because that's also incorrect. It's just grasping at non-existence. And it's in finding that very, very fine balance that we train in this instruction. So if throughout this week you remind yourself on occasion, this is like a dream, I'm in a dream, it might actually help you in both mastering this thought and waking reality, and for some people assist with lucid dreaming and inducing lucid dreaming. So that's also the added benefit there. And that would be quite a powerful practice to do. So that's kind of the invitation. And next time we'll continue talking about this and then go through the rest of the ultimate bodhicitta instructions. So wishing you a beautiful night, and thank you so much. And thank you to all who have joined online. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, let's dedicate the energy of our practice to, and of listening and of thinking and of all the positive thoughts that we had, trillions of them in just this 1 hour and 45 minutes. Let's dedicate it to the full awakening for all beings to become fully awakened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And for the precious holy bodhisattvas that are present in this world to be present in this world forever, spreading wisdom, love, joy, compassion, and wisdom for the rest of eternity. And that's it. Now we can go and celebrate and still say it all is a dream. Thank you.